Commissioner Wood, when you're ready, you may begin.
Hi, so I'm Peter Wood. I'm a Ward 1 resident, and I'm currently Commissioner of ANC 1C03 in Adams Morgan. I wanted to take this opportunity today to voice my opinion or some views that kind of fill in a gap that I see a lot when we discuss housing, homelessness, and kind of human services in general, which is domestic violence and domestic abuse. So in my opinion, as elected officials and really as a government, we have a moral responsibility to always, in all circumstances, prioritize the mitigation and prevention of suffering of the people that we represent. I also think it's sound fiscal policy. We spend a lot of money, time, and energy responding to problems after they happen rather than preventing their occurrence in the first place. But I know realistically we have to kind of address those things in tandem. So domestic violence in a lot of ways is a housing issue. One of the key reasons people have housing insecurity is because they lack a safe place to stay. And that's independent of the structural integrity of the building they might reside in. I personally think that every human being deserves to eat, sleep, and leisure in peace. And we've had a lot of really good, insightful testimony today from people basically saying how we can build and acquire units for people to live in, fill those with people to stay in those, and find equitable measures to finance said units. But there's a really fundamental, integral part of this discussion that I think always needs to be a part. It's not just how do we get people into housing, but how do we make sure that those houses are safe environments to have and build lives in. To put it more in specific terms, some numbers I've heard that I support as starting points. Well, first, I support not cutting budgets for support for survivors of domestic violence. And ideally, I'd like to see that it be expanded. Some numbers I've heard for next fiscal year, an additional $5 million in support for survivors of domestic violence and $25 million over 3 years for housing, which I think housing is important because when we talk about addressing things in tandem, it's one way we do that, which is having housing for people that are in abusive and violent situations at home can offer immediate assistance to get those people safe right now and also in the future. It's vital so those people know that that system is both existent and reliable so that people can get out of violent situations earlier so that we can prevent further problems because people waited too late, which sometimes leads to homicide, sometimes leads to some of the most tragic situations that we ever see. And this is something I think not only needs to be a part of this discussion when we talk about housing and human services, but needs to, in my opinion, be centered to it, which is what are the ways in which people are exploited and hurt and how do we prevent that from getting worse and happening again. So to put it in kind of human terms to close off, and I think that I'm speaking to the choir in some ways, a lot of people I hope agree with me on this call, but it's honestly very, very tiring and infuriating when I hear people talk about just the immense stresses and pressures that they go through. And then when I see that policymakers and people with influence not only don't often listen, but often lack the capacity or desire to empathize to the point that we see people treated as second or third class citizens. And when you consider things like the gender dynamics of domestic violence, we're talking about people who are literally the backbone of all support, emotional, often financial, often psychosocial, who are basically left on their own with very little support to just do the basic, which is to have a place to be able to go and call home and not be in fear. So yeah, this is hopefully the start of many more things to come. I know that Councilmember Doe, you do a lot of work and emphasize this point as well. So I hope we can continue as a community to address it. But I think just academically, we're in this pandemic where we already have research coming out showing that the likelihood of domestic violence is increasing because of the circumstances. But even if that wasn't the case, it's a huge issue. So yeah, thanks for letting me voice these concerns because they're concerns of mine, but also of many constituents. And I'm excited to get some work in this area. Thank you.